next thing I wanted to talk about might surprise a few people, but I had S. Barahini on, and we talked about rebuilding teams. We've had extensive talks about the Nets, so I don't feel bad that we kind of had to blow through them. But Charlotte Hornets fans were upset that we didn't get to them. We got to every other quote-unquote rebuilding team. We ran out of time. I am sorry, but let's talk about the state of the Charlotte Hornets rebuild, which we said on this podcast, which, by the way, this is why Grant and I go through those, even though they seem basic and some of them are, they're obvious ideas, but that's why we do the every team or break up per conference thing, so that it gives us a chance to talk and analyze every team and try to appeal to every single fan base. But for the Hornets specifically, I've liked basically everything they've done like since the trade deadline. Now, the quibble, there are two things you could quibble over, and let's start with the biggest one. So you give Miles Bridges, it ends up being a 3-year, $75 million deal, I believe. Yes, 3-year, $75 million deal. And from a human morality perspective, it makes me uneasy because it doesn't seem like, and publicly, it doesn't seem like he has done or said anything that makes that demands the benefit of the doubt or a chance at redemption. Maybe stuff has happened behind the scenes. I'm not saying you need to publicize if you've done something good, but just the initial domestic violence incident followed by the allegations thereafter, credible allegations, by the way. It makes me, from a human element, it makes me uneasy and not thrilled. However, and I really hate doing this, but however, he did the punishment that was bestowed upon him was argued, according to the NBA's rules, like he ends up missing an entire season, which is not what he was actually suspended for. So he served the suspension or the punishment that they levied, and it seems like the league has moved on, and this is someone they're going to take talent over morality at any given point. And this isn't to, I'm not trying to give the NBA cover from an individual's perspective, is that we can't look at a corporation and this massive entity as an arbiter or a billboard for, it'd be great if we could, but it's just not going to happen. And so there could be just this disproportionate views of, well, okay, well, why didn't he, like, he's out here getting this huge contract, but Jonte Porter's banned for life after betting on games. You don't want to get into comparing the two just too much, because it in some way then ends up diluting the severity of both, or at least one of them. And that's just not something you want to do, especially when there are other people involved. The mother of Bridges' children, his children specifically. From a basketball perspective, this roster now, though, with him, when you look at them drafting Tidjane Salaün, when you look at them having Brandon Miller and LaMelo Ball, and having Mark Williams, that's like a deceptively big lineup there, where it's LaMelo Ball, I think, is your smallest player at 6'5". And so that's an interesting core off which to work. Now, would I have taken Salaün in the Hornet spot? No, I would have went with Cody Williams, but that's because Cody Williams is at the top of my board. I still think he's interesting from the perspective of, I don't agree with a lot of the draft comps I've seen. I guess Obi Toppin's the one that I've seen a lot. Maybe you can make a case offensively for the way he moves without the ball and his ability to, finish above the rim and having the 3-point shot, which percentage-wise does not look good. Free throw percentage was encouraging, and I was watching some of his jumpers that are mostly coming off the catch. There's nothing that stands out. There's sometimes where the form looks a little wonky, it feels like, where he's kind of off to his right or his elbows out too much. But just from a comfort perspective, it seems like he will be an above average shooter in the NBA. Now, in the situations where he's taking off the dribble looks, needs to tighten his handle one for that. But there are some times where it looks smooth and the floor is really open. I don't know if he's ever going to become that type of an offensive player. And this team doesn't need him. If you're going to keep LaMelo and you have Brandon Miller and you do have Miles Bridges, you don't need him to be that. Where I diverge from the comps is, Salaün has the chance to be really good defensively. And I don't know if he's going to hold up on the ball right away, but this seems like someone who, when you look at players and you kind of wonder, all right, we don't know if they're good defenders out of the gate, but they can be disruptive away from the ball, or they can force turnovers a bunch, or you can put them on really difficult assignments. And I think this is someone who could credibly guard both the 3 and the 4. And then if you really wanted to get funky, let's just roll him out as a small ball 5 and see what happens. So I like purely talent on the court perspective. I kind of like the base off which they're working. And I think that we've I don't know if it's because the Hornets have been so bad and look incompetent for so long that we've lost the plot a little bit on how to kind of view the context of their rebuild, but they're now a net plus in the first round pick department. I think the deal they made for PJ Washington was good for them, and it turns out it worked out for Dallas quite well too. They also have that pick that they got from Miami in the Terry Rozier trade. Lotto protected in 2027, but then unprotected thereafter. That's like you're a net plus in the first round pick department. You technically owe one to the Spurs, but it's only it's now, I think we're entering the final year of its lottery protection. Then it turns into 2 seconds. So you have all your own picks and you have some extra firsts here and you have like actually intriguing young players. And I mean, you look at Josh Green, maybe some people throwing him in here. He's only 23. I don't love him. I think he's become kind of like the idea of one of those players. The idea of Josh Green is better than Josh Green. This might be a team that can put him on the ball more. So I think that he could be more interesting offensively. I just never really seen it from him defensively. You can call him a wing defender, but I don't know if he is really a net positive in that department. And if you're asking, well, is he better than Miles Bridges on that end? Might be a good barometer because Miles Bridges' defense is spotty. I would say Josh Green is probably a better individual defender than Miles Bridges. Miles Bridges, because of his size and frame, is going to be more malleable when you're looking if you want to move assignments around and kind of tailor if you're trying to, insulate LaMelo or just do different things with your lineups. They're in a really good spot here, and it might take some time. And I think that, like, even the Grant Williams acquisition ended up panning out really well for them. And you look at just what he's getting paid, basically less than mid-level exception money at this point moving forward. That's a good value deal. And you can do some interesting stuff with your front court lineups now. And the other thing too is just you have guys that could have value in the trade market if you want more pick equity. And I'm saying guys in the sense of Micic is a team that could help out a lot of other squads. Like where if I was the Nuggets, I would have been trying to figure out how to get him instead of waiting on this Russell Westbrook thing. Like, is there a way to get Micic for the Zeke Naji deal? Can you compensate enough without including second round equity? That's someone who, because he has a team option too in 25, 26, could be viewed as an inspiring contract. Cody Martin, not been healthy in 2 years, but you look at that as someone who's on the books for 8.1 million and he's non-guaranteed the year after. Okay, salary matching for sure, but do you remember we're not that far removed from the version of Cody Martin that was hitting some threes, giving you some connective passing on the offensive end, and then just really defending his ass off. Like the breadth of assignments he was covering. That would be 2021, 22, I think. Yeah. Was incredible. And like, he's 28 going on 29 it's not about him getting better, but you can't rule out that he's going to be good. You have Nick Richards, really solid backup big. You have Trey Mann. There's just some weight. Like there's the word that's used a lot with him is wiggle on the offense. Like he's slippery on the offense end with the ball in his hands. So just a lot of these, even if you want to throw Grant Williams in there, a lot of these, and Josh Green included, a lot of these sort of intriguing flyers that I don't think it's going to make the team a lot better than expected, but I think you look at, because you have Bridges, because you have LaMelo, because Brad Miller was good as a rookie. If you get good health from Mark Williams and Cody Martin, and if you're playing Micic, like, yeah, there's a chance everyone might pencil this team in for just another blah, blah season. I don't think they'll contend for a playing spot. And if they end up doing so, I do believe they'll trade out of it. But like, this team has a promising base. And I've seen more discussions. We'll get to the cliche part of this now. I was trying to not be the typical, should they trade LaMelo? But like Tony Jones, the Athletic, respect the hell out of that guy, was the one who kind of introduced the idea that, I'm not putting this at his feet, a lot of people believe this, think that you should move LaMelo and just rebuild around Brandon Miller. If there's something in LaMelo's medicals, and he's had all these lower body, specifically ankle issues over the years, entertain it. But like, that max contract is not we're talking about a 23-year-old who's already been an all-star, I would call him transcendent vision. If you don't want to say he's a transcendent player, he has transcendent vision and his ability to make full court passes in the open floor, his ability to see things, just the live dribble playmaking aspect, the shooting, both away from the ball, like as someone who could play off Brandon Miller, who can play off Bridges, who can play off Salaün if you want to give them on ball reps, could play off Josh Green. Apparently it's important to get him on ball reps. But also the pull-up shooting, like that is there. And yeah, there are things you'd like him to work on. He's like, he can be stiff and inattentive defensively, and he can be disruptive too because he has great size, but it waxes and wanes. Yeah, you'd like to see that get better. He's 23. He might get better, especially if he's healthier on that end. You'd also like to see him if he's not going to get stronger, so we're getting to the point where it's okay, can we expect him to get a lot stronger? Is there a way? He got to the basket a lot more last year, an encouraging sign. The finishing numbers are still not great. He's 23. We're talking about, okay, he finally increased his at the basket frequency. I should have had that exact number pulled up of how much he increased it by. But like the LaMelo Ball drives were a thing, and they were anarchic to some extent. But like the fact that he was doing it, maybe I view that as step one, and then the finishing should come after that. So his rim frequency, 32% of his shots came at the rim last year, compared to 23 the year before and 28 the year before that. He had a ton as a rookie, but like that just played in only 51 games, and like the sample size is all weird. And we're basing it off of the 2 seasons where like he was a more seasoned pro. He increases, and still, 56% at the rim. No, that's bad. That's terrible shot percentage, 23rd percentile inefficiency. But he could get better, and like he can score from at least 2 levels right now. Like when you're looking at getting to the mid range and having the counters there, he shot 44%, again, 22 game sample size. Sorry, 40% from mid range. Like that's an active counter. Now that you can kind of stash him. Oh, not stash him, but you can use him off the ball. This is like a unique building block that I don't think it's almost, what's the saying about absence making the heart grow fonder? It almost feels like LaMelo Ball's injuries. And I think this tends to happen in sports is people forget, or they then just automatically lower his rating or his value. I can't get there yet. I mean, like we've seen, look at Steph Curry, what he turned into after dealing with some ankle problems early in his career. Like I'm still really high on LaMelo Ball, and I would not move him. And I think if you weren't happy with the demeanor with which he was playing offense last year, there's more like, if you're healthy, talent or coherence on this roster, because you could say, well, I mean, it's talent, but it's probably a drop off from Terry Rozier because they're younger and less experienced. But like there's a clear vision in place. And look, you have a coach in Charles Lee. You come in, there's like a fresh voice in there for him. I think that could help as well. There's off-court stuff that we know that's public. There's also off-court stuff that's not public. Yeah, that could be a concern. But this is, when you're looking at the talent on the basketball court, I hate framing things this way to dismiss any concerns you might have about anything off the court. But just looking at it from like a basketball view, this team is in a pretty good spot right now. And it changes if you don't believe that LaMelo or Brandon Miller are capable of being the guiding light for a rebuild. But one of the single toughest thing to do in a rebuild is to not just get the guy around whom you base everything, but it's to get 2 guys around whom you base everything. The Hornets, I firmly believe, have those 2 guys. And there's health that needs to be caked in for there with LaMelo, the caveat. But to be at that point, when you're still kind of early in this iteration of the rebuild, we know that they've been all over the place for a while now. That's also a big deal. And we're kind of also forgetting, I wouldn't call him, I'd call him part of the core, but I'm not ready to call him a building block. Mark Williams dealt with a lot of back stuff last year. That's a red flag, slightly alarming. Let's see how he heals. I believe he said recently that he's feeling pretty good. When you watch this guy, and I don't know if he's ever going to expand his range to include kind of like, oh, does that floater go down at a higher rate, or is he going to take the mid-range jumper? He shot 7 of 16 on jumpers last year, and there were hints of it as his rookie season. Don't think he's ever going to scale out to 3, but that's like he is still an extremely tantalizing developmental piece. And I think his rim protection slipped a little bit last year. I don't know how much of that had to do with like the initial injury, the fact that he just didn't play a ton, and he looked pretty good at parts during early of the year, especially with some of those LaMelo minutes. But when you watch him, there's like, I don't even know who I'd compare him to. And I'm very interested to see if they can get more out of him. Coming in, I was kind of higher on him as a passer. Can they do more stuff with him in the short roll? I don't think we've seen enough of that just yet. They could experiment with that, but like the ability to play 4 out around him basically at all times now, if you want to, maybe that's something you can unlock. But when you watch him play, he kind of has like, I don't know, we'll have to see how it is with all this back stuff now in the rear view, but I don't have a great comp. But the 2 players that immediately like came to mind is, what if Hassan Whiteside was also Onyeka Okongwu? And it's so those are imperfect players. You might not like any of those players, but he seems like those 2 rolled into one. That's a really good player, especially when you think about what Hassan Whiteside was at his peak, but like having the additional mobility and offensive range and vision of an Onyeka Okongwu. I don't know, when you're looking defensively specifically, it feels like he's probably closer to a Whiteside than an Okongwu. I don't think we've seen enough from him looking at the sort of lateral stuff on the perimeter. There's definitely been moments. I don't know if he can be that all over the place. Let's just cite ages again. This is someone who is going into his 3rd year, and he is going to be, this will be his age 23 season. He's 22 right now. I think the Hornets are in a good spot. If I give him a vibe rating on their rebuild, there's still like, okay, well, how does Miles Bridges fit in long term? Is he a part of the core here? What is your intent to do with Josh Green? How are you going to use Salaün right out of the gate? I can't give them the 10 of 10, 11 of 10, no notes, but just based off, it's like if they wanted to get assets via trade for Nick Richards, for Micic, for fucking Bridges at some point, that like even I think a team would give you some. I doubt you get a first round pick for Williams at this point. Maybe if he has a hell of a year and by the trade deadline, but he's only 26 years old. He's 25. This will be his age 26 season. That's like they have a lot of movable parts that you could consider you can consider them dispensable. They're valuable, but they're not mission critical to what you're doing over the long term. So they're like they can be light on their feet in terms of roster building. And so I think we have to kind of cake in. This is a new regime, so you don't have to bake it in too much, but you do have to account for, right? Will they short circuit this at all? Look at the years of the track record. We still don't know enough about really any of these guys, and that includes LaMelo. So there's the wild card aspect. I'm gonna go 7.3 out of 10 is the vibes that I'm getting for the Charlotte Hornets rebuild.